Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football, from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
The GSMc College Football Podcast, hosted on the GSMc Podcast Network. I am their host, Ethan Orfe, and we have a lot of stuff going on today to talk about. We have some talk with Mark Emmert seeking Senate's help for athlete pay. That's what we're first going to start on, and then we're just going to devolve into other ranging topics of the college football atmosphere, as the off season is among us. But college football never sleeps, and no, neither do we. So, Mark Emmert, he, along with other members of his team, went to a summit essentially for the NIL, discussion with the Senate. And if you don't know what the NIL means, it's for name, image, and likeness. And that is the sort of the 3-letter acronym for this whole player fair compensation for collegiate sports. And it was had last Tuesday on Capitol Hill. There was a bunch of lawmakers there, and essentially, Emmert was trying to ask the lawmakers for help in order to stop, individual states from, creating laws in order to have players be compensated for their name, image, and likeness, instead of, solving the issue. The NCAA, since he is the head of it, he's the CEO, so to speak, as one of the lawmakers said viciously to him in this very, very heated, conversation, that a lot of lawmakers are very, very disappointed in Mr. Mark for, the pace that the NCAA has taken in not making any actions towards this, as it's become too egregious. The NCAA makes so much money on players. It's unreal. And the level of lethargic process towards the goal of getting players compensated for it has, in effect, played a large part into overall frustration on all sides, because in reality, Congress doesn't want to get involved in this sort of thing. But you've kind of pressed their hand, because now states are making laws, and you don't want that to happen, because then you lose control. And you want a blanketed rule, so that way the NCAA still has all the power and decision making on this thing. And yet, here we are asking lawmakers to essentially pause the lawmaking process on the states. And honestly, the senators don't want to hear that, especially because he doesn't have a plan. Him, as in Mark Emmert, he doesn't have a plan. They don't have a plan in place to, rectify this, and that's the big thing. There's no plan. How in the world can you be essentially the CEO of one of the most profitable sporting organizations in the world, and you don't know how to handle something that's been going on for decades, essentially, and it hasn't been any worse than it is now? It's come time. You have to pay up. Essentially, it's time to pay up, and there's no more time to dilly-dally around about it. There's no more time to sit and say, well, let's just hold it out and see where it goes, because it's too late now. You're going to lose money. Things are going to come into place to where either lawmakers change things or people will find another way. They mentioned James Wiseman and that whole situation, and now he's not playing in NCAA at all. And that's not what you want for your product. That's not what you want for fans of certain programs and organizations, and for the NCAA in particular, they're just not what you want. Things are going to change, and it's either going to be on your hand or it's going to be on somebody else's hand. But it's going to take the time is now, because nobody's waiting anymore. Nobody wants to wait. It's going to be problematic, and I think this is the issue that a lot of people have had over the NCAA for a long time for multiple reasons. It's not just for NIL, for name, image, and likeness purposes. It's for any decision making whatsoever about anything. They take so much time to come up with decisions that half the time either people don't care anymore or they just look incompetent. And incompetency is something that you never want to hear with an organization that makes this amount of money. This is similar things to why people have problems with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and other things like that, is because when you make it seem like there's nothing that you can do, when you're the CEO, you own, or you're the owner of a company, and you have all this power to choose what not and what can to do, and you just rather choose nothing, you look foolish, essentially. And these lawmakers don't want, clearly for one thing, they don't want to be working with somebody who looks foolish. They want plans. They want organized things to be able to make things happen. And when you walk up on a podium and ask for help with nothing to give, how are they supposed to offer you help? This was just a bad look for the NCAA in general. And honestly, I don't know really. They're going to have to figure something out, because they have another meeting, or they want something done by 2021. And it's too long. It's like, it's not fast enough. Things are going to happen sooner rather than later. And this is the second meeting about NIL that he's had. And once again, he's trying to put pressures on lawmakers that honestly just don't exist. How can you pressure somebody to do something if you don't provide something on the table? That's like, so newsflash, you can't go to somebody to tell you to help with a problem and have no solution for the problem that you essentially have created. You should know better than anybody what you want. Well, we know what he wants to do. He wants none of this to happen in the first place, but he hasn't either thought about or even considered the fact that this is not something that you can just negotiate your way out of never doing. Like, this is over. Like, that's what essentially people are telling you. The days of not paying collegiate athletes or compensating them to some degree is over. Not only because the unnecessary amount of, not stupidity, it's not stupid, but it's old school, and it's tired out. That's what it is. The tired out take of collegiate athletes is they get free education, and that should be well enough. Well, for one thing, education is extremely inflated in the first place as far as price for everybody. So that's understandable. I understand how people think that way, but in order to compensate free education, these athletes have to go through so much to essentially, the NCAA, D1, even D2 to some degree, it's their job to be athletes, and all they get is they don't have proper sleep patterns. They don't do, school is second nature. You think that it's student first, athlete second, but that's just not the case. It's athlete first, athlete second, and you do online classes in a big house living with all the other athletes. That's exactly what it is. And the degree means nothing. Most people don't finish it, especially if they're going to the league. And the ones that do, sometimes it's not something that they really wanted to do. It was just easy to get through, and they had more dreams on playing ball or going to the league than others do. And that's just the sad reality of the whole situation. What can you provide them now to where there's guys who honestly painted the image of the NCAA for a few years. Like, even someone like Johnny Manziel, who was essentially the darling of the NCAA for 3 years, and he saw some money, I guess, against the NCAA rules, code of conduct stuff, but from the NCAA he saw nothing. Couldn't use his face to capitalize things. He couldn't make his brand bigger. Someone like Robert Griffin III couldn't make his brand bigger. Baker Mayfield, Todd Gurley got in trouble for jersey stuff or using his name. And it's just simple stuff, man. It's not like they're committing crimes, man. They're trying to make money. They're trying to make some money because clearly whatever the NCAA is considered compensates them, and as far as education is not enough. And that's why you have all these under the table deals that they don't seem to want to bring up to light either, right? So I don't really understand it. I don't get it. But let's take a break, and then coming out, we're going to talk about some more athlete stuff, but more about the ancestral or the generational tree and why it's so difficult to deal with sometimes. That's coming up.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMc Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMcpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMcpodcast.com for more info.
When growing up, one of my favorite shows of all time was Avatar: The Last Airbender. It was a Nickelodeon show that ran during the mid 2000s to early 2010s, and then it came back to a new show called Legend of Korra that I also enjoyed very much. And one of the main themes was the idea of the Avatar, which was this it was kind of like this godlike figure within their fantasy world who could use all four elements and was a beacon of hope and all things good to keep balance into the world. And every so often, an avatar would, naturally pass away or die, and another one would assume the role as the avatar after a few years or even instantly, and they would be born as the avatar. And just like that, I'm getting to this, just like that, it feels like in sports, we have moments like this where we have this superior athletic figure in our lives. So like LeBron James or Michael Jordan, Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, Serena Williams, Candace Parker, plenty of athletes that seem to be kind of larger than life, that untouchable guys and people who even after retirement still have a presence about them that is seemingly untouchable. And then they have their children, they raise them, and they come up through the ranks, and most times they generally don't, pan out as big as their predecessors, right? They are not usually the successor that we think they are, and typically that's because our expectations are so high, unrealistically, and it's really a detriment to the kids more times than not. But at the end of the day, they're just not they're not like their mothers and fathers, and that's what we worry about with people like Bronny James and Dwayne Wade's son and other people in those same predicaments, especially when we look back at like what happened with Jordan's sons and I remember the quote is saying, "I feel bad for whoever has to follow this up," as alluding to his son and things like that. So here we are with the Mannings, as Archie Manning played for the Saints for a long time, star quarterback. He has three sons, two of which are Eli and Peyton, who essentially become two of the most well-known, well-respected quarterbacks of the last 20 years, essentially. Both won 2 Super Bowls. Both have been in many Pro Bowls. Very successful quarterback family. Well, their third brother has a son also named Archie. And he played wide receiver for Peyton, I believe. I don't think it was Eli. I believe it was for Peyton. And his football career ended short because of back issues, but he had a son named Archie, and he's one of the most well-kept superstar athletes. Well, superstar athletes. He's 15, so keep that in mind. But he's one of the best-kept, I guess, superstar, megastar athlete children or family children in America, and not that many people are really thinking about it, but he is somebody who was recently written about. And the stuff that people are saying about him is unreal. So they don't allow really any media access to this kid whatsoever, as in the Mannings. They want no part of it. You can't send him offers because they'll just did not turn them down. So college coaches around the country have come to see this kid play 7-on-7 tournaments, even in the great state of Louisiana. Ed Orgeron can't send an offer to this kid because there is no offer to be had if there is no offer that will be received. That is a quote from the Mannings themselves. They won't receive any offers because they want Archie to have essentially a normal high school life, or not worry about it, or, he's just 15. He doesn't even drive himself to practice. He has to have a teammate drive him to practice who is a senior quarterback who he took his spot, and essentially he was converted to wide receiver. And they're good friends, apparently. They drive each other, or he drives him to practice because, Archie can't drive. He's 15. So, first of all, this kid, according to the article I read, is really, really good, amazing, supposedly. I've never really seen him play. There's barely any videos around about him, and they're really, really protective of this young kid, and they don't want him in the public spotlight that much, even to the point to where it might be a detriment to his collegiate future, as people in his class may jump him in schools and programs that might be prestigious. But I think this method, a lot of college coaches who are not named in this article have said that this is one of the most refreshing things that we've seen. We're in an age where showing your skills and marketing yourself early on using social media is such a tactic, to the point that it's even encouraged by media professionals and other coaches and high school coaches, because you got to get your name out there, especially when you're competing against all these, ESPN top 300 lists and all this, 5-star, 4-star, who's that, who's this. So the level of recruiting is gone off the rails. And this is one of the rare times where, they're letting this kid develop to a level where, he already has the best 3 guys you could ever talk to about throwing the football. Just easily accessible at all times to work on his mechanics and throwing and ideas of playing quarterback. And, what more can you really get from something like that? He's in the perfect scenario. He doesn't need to make a name for himself. His name is his name, essentially. He's just, it's going to be really interesting to see in the next few years, because he's going to be in the 2023 recruiting class. And I really cannot wait to see what happens because it's going to be astronomical, the amount of recruiting that's going to happen for this kid. Because, like it or not, the Mannings aren't going to be able to control that senior year. Maybe not even the junior year. Because he's almost, he's a freshman now. He'll be a junior or a sophomore, junior, senior. Senior year is going to be astronomical. It doesn't matter what he does. His name will be there. This radar is going to implode because people are going to want to see film on this guy. They're going to want to watch him play. There's nobody probably any bigger, wouldn't be any bigger than maybe LeBron James' son, just because LeBron is the perfect example of a kid who, not really till like his freshman year of high school, outside the Cleveland area at least, where he literally became a megastar overnight, and the thought of him being potentially better than Michael Jordan, and just a prospect that we've never seen before. And they're making it sound like this is similar, where Archie might be one of the best quarterback prospects we've ever seen, and we haven't even seen him. And the Mannings refuse to really show him off like that. And I just find that whole, route of, raising a child when you are mega famous, your family's mega famous. He's doing the thing that made your family mega famous. Really, really interesting, because they really, really seem to care about raising your child, or raising a member of their family, giving him an upbringing that he'll be able to cherish, rather than an upbringing that will not always have good memories. Because as we've seen with media and with young people, exposing them to how the media can tear people down and, break down people, just from, even LeBron James' son has been subjected to the terrible things that media can bring. I think he was somebody threw something at him a few weeks ago, and that person, of course, was distorted out. But people have no limits to what they'll do to kind of pick a piece of this, the media shine in the pie. So you never really know what sort of things that can affect on a guy or a child or anybody, even somebody older. So we'll just have to wait and see if, the new Avatar will be as good as his predecessors. As one Manning retires, another one blossoms. So we're going to take another break after that, and we're going to get into some Michigan State news, as they have seemed to found, controversially at least, their new head coach.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So, Mel Tucker, who was a one-year coach of Colorado to lead them to a 5-7 record, is now the head coach of Michigan State. That is not something that I feel most people thought of. He was said to be not interested in the job, and he recommitted himself to Colorado to be their head coach. And there was more guys that Michigan were looking at, as they looked at for the 49ers defensive coordinator coach. And they looked at someone, just out of the blue, another guy who also turned them down and called him essentially a waffling flake. I guess that was just for someone whose last name is Fickle, that was kind of funny to hear call him a waffling flake. But Cincinnati's coach also turned down the job, and they called him a waffling flake, and thus that Tuesday they decided to get Mel Tucker, who essentially flaked on them originally, said, no, I don't want to do it. And how did they get him? After affirming that he was going to stay with Colorado and fight through the Pac-12 and, do the whole grinding from the bottom up sort of thing. They doubled the salary that was offered by Colorado. So he had a $2.7 million contract to be the coach of Colorado. And what did they do? $5.5 million annually. So he's one of the top paid coaches in the league. After 1 year of being head coach of Colorado, that had a 5-7 record. And of those losses, they were outscored by more than 8 points per game. And they lost to Oregon by 42, Washington by 31, Utah by 30, and UCLA by 17, who was not good last year. And, I'm not the type of guy to hate on a coach for getting money, per se. Get your money. It's not his fault that, Michigan State doesn't know what to do with all the money that they make. And this is generally a bigger problem with these conferences like the Big Ten and the SEC about the revenue that they make, because they just make so much more money than everybody else, to where they can just kind of decide to say, I have all this money. We don't need this coach, but there's no coaching available. So we're just going to go and scramble around and find a coach. And if we can't find one that we really like, we're just going to try and coerce somebody who really doesn't believe they're good for the job, but we'll just throw a bunch of money at them and essentially stunt their career growth, because they're just not going to pan out. And it wasn't going to be a good fit from the beginning, but they had no other choice. So, another guy who ended up going in a similar direction was, Eli, Drinkwitz for Missouri. 6 years, $4 million. And this was after a year of already coaching another team. And, it was in the Sun Belt Conference. That's not SEC level football. You don't know what he can do. And we don't know what he can do. But there's just no way that a guy like that for 6 years, $4 million, he should have that. There's just no way that's going to happen. Arkansas, in a similar situation, fired their coach Chad Morris. And then all of a sudden they had to go pay $3 million a year for 5 years to Sam Pittman, Georgia's offensive line coach. And he never had been a coordinator at the defensive or at the Division I level. A coordinator, not a head coach. He's never been a coordinator before. Now he's a head coach. And I mean, I get it. Georgia has a lot of good offensive linemen, but the jump doesn't make any sense. It hasn't made any sense for a long time. And I think the bigger picture is, why does the NCAA has all these guys who are basically money-making head honchos that don't know what to do with it, and there's nobody in the administrative level that has any sense, and you're seeing money just fly by the wayside and run rampant, and all these bad decisions, and you see programs going down the toilet because of bad decision making, and it's essentially a forever flushing, I guess, vortex of bad decisions going on in the NCAA, and hasn't seemed to be, everything is either band-aided or essentially just stopgapped to the point to where it just sort of leaks out but doesn't completely overflow, and it's going to start overflowing. The gap is going to fall out. The It's like when you get a bloody nose and you try to put a piece of paper, but the blood is basically consuming the piece of paper now, or the toilet paper, toilet tissue. Your nose is bloody, man. And that's what the NCAA has. And bloody nose, they don't know what to do, don't know how to handle it from so many other different angles of their business. So from recruiting problems, from under the table money giving to recruits to bring them in, to players and conduct issues and putting that under the table and hiding it, and then getting police reports on stuff from years ago that now comes to resurface, and finding out coaches or assistant coaches and stuff are covering things up, to just the lack of ineptitude at replacing, I guess, coaches for whatever reason, maybe the retirement or front office things go on, administrative things, and the programs start to really slide in relevance and culture, that it doesn't seem completely natural anymore. Now it just seems like because of total incompetence. And then you have, of course, the NIL issues with players seemingly seems to be needing to be compensated because the money, revenue that NCAA makes in all realms of sports, from football, basketball, baseball, hockey, all types of collegiate sports, is massively unproportional to what the players receive. And they're like, they put them in facilities, or they say the money goes to facilities, but it really goes to all these administrators that are making money that really is unrealistic. It's just unreal how much money they make, and the athletes don't see any of it, essentially. And that's their job, to be athletes. So it's unreal how all this money ends up seeing all these other people's hands, and it never goes to the athletes. Now, when reading this article from SI by Pat Ford, he had a great quote. He said, "Now he will be one of the," as in the coach Mel Tucker, "now he will be one of the richest head coaches in a bloated sport with no track record to back it up. But this is how it works in collegiate athletics, or college athletics, where administrators who are bad at their jobs throw increasingly bigger piles of money at their problems, but never at the athletes." End quote. So right on the head is how I feel. And I'll even take it a little bit of a step further before we go to break, that this is why I have a bigger issue of why the NCAA doesn't have at least a one-time transfer rule to let players transfer without having to hold out a whole season. Because you let coaches flip-flop, essentially, from different programs, get stolen by different programs without any sort of repercussion or any sort of, breaking commitments or contract stuff. But when a player wants to transfer, they have to waste essentially a season of their career sitting on the bench. It just doesn't seem right, and it always seems like they make choices that don't seem to help their business, and it always seems to be hurting them, but they just don't seem to care. The NCAA has become a very, very lackadaisical, business as far as, and the money has gotten so big so fast that they don't know what to do with it unless they do all the wrong things with it. And that essentially is the underlying problem, I should say, that they don't know what to do with all this money, all this revenue, and it's becoming a bigger issue than what you could possibly imagine. So with that said, we're going to take another break, and then we're going to get into some Ohio State news, which doesn't look like it's going to be any better either.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMc Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMcpodcast.com for more info.
All right, so we're going to just bounce around a few different topics to start the segment, shall we? So first things first, like I alluded to in the last segment, 2 ex-Ohio State players plead not guilty to the rape allegations made to them this past week, as they were both charged with rape and kidnapping Tuesday by Franklin County Municipal Court. And on Wednesday, they were both dismissed from the Ohio State program. Coach Ryan Day has said, "I am not making any statement on the criminal charges, but it's clear that they did not live up to our standards and expectations, and that the athletics department will make sure they both continue to have access to the health and well-being resources available to students and student athletes." The warrant have been issued for their arrest. Both were charged with rape for threat of force and kidnapping for purposes of engaging in sexual activity. The charges are first-degree felonies. So looking at all that, and then recently there were also a video apparently that was given to authorities that showcases that one of the members in the case said that you have to essentially give consent via screen recording or video recording while laughing, and also said that you have to go take a shower. And it was pretty telling that something like that evidence is not going to sit well in court. And the officials said in court that the police have the video recording, so I'm sure it's going to be used at some point in trial. But for the program of Ohio State, this is definitely a blemish on the Ohio State name. Granted, it doesn't have anything to do with the football field, but it never looks good. And of course, Ryan Day says all the right things. And this is like the second biggest thing to happen while he's been on the regime, since the NCAA suspended Chase Young for 2 games for accepting a personal loan in violation of NCAA rules, which in all honesty, that's nothing compared to what's being discussed about here today. Next, we go to Kentucky, where Eastern Kentucky linebacker Michael Harris was arrested earlier this week after nearly body slamming a police officer in Grove City, Ohio, as he almost to the pavement rather, and he's facing charges of resisting arrest, obstructing official business, and disorderly conduct. While intoxicated, Harris has been suspended from the team and all football-related activities, according to a statement Thursday afternoon to ESPN from the university. He was a redshirt freshman at Auburn last year, playing in 11 games, and then he transferred from Auburn last month. The dash cam footage recorded from the police officer. Harris appears to confront one officer while another stands by. After the 2 officers engaged physically with Harris, the guy, or the player I should say, can be seen grabbing one of the male officers around the waist and lifting him above his shoulders before falling on top of the officer. Some videos have been provided by TMZ Sports, and I'm sure you can find them at other news outlets as well. And Harris was still in custody as Thursday afternoon in Franklin County Jail, the same jail that both the Ohio State players accused of rape and kidnapping are also being placed in. Of course, the school has to go through all the investigation and doing all, what schools do and what coaches do. They try to say all the right things because this is beyond football at this point. When authorities and police officers and guys like that have to start getting involved, things definitely change the grand scope of things. And I guess the bottom line is this: if you are if you're a guy who is about to go to college, or you're a freshman in college, or you are a player who's about to get recruited or looking to go to school for football or any other sport collegiately, make sure you have it together, man. One decision can change the whole ramifications of your life. And I'm sure these examples are not the only ones you can see. There's been plenty of unfortunate examples of this, but nothing is guaranteed in this life, and you got to make sure that you do the right thing to do right by, your family, the people that you do this for, the people that you continue to, push yourself for, because at the end of the day, these type of mistakes are not ones that you can take back or make up. There's no redos in life. So being able to, embody a level of professionalism, having a moral compass that allows you to make, the best decision for you at the time, and, the best decision for the people around you, because stuff like this doesn't just affect you anymore. It also affects other people's families, your family, the university, the program as a whole. Like the first thing that people read when they see this sort of stuff is the university name, usually the 3-letter acronym. So that's the first thing that people see, and that's probably why they click in the first place. Because I'll be honest, I didn't know these guys' names until I read the articles, and now I only know them because of things that I don't want to know them for. So it just goes to show you that what you do and how you utilize your name is very important, and you never want to be seen in stuff like this. So, do the right thing. So that's essentially all I have to really say about it is, make good choices in life, because they will catch up. The bad ones, all your choices will catch up with you, rather good or bad. So try to make the good ones before you make the bad ones. At least that's what I was taught. That's how I would choose to live my life. If I have kids, that's what I would choose to teach them, because, everybody has a way to live their life, and everybody has the right to choose. And not every decision will be the right one, but you kind of you got to be making the important right decisions. I don't really know if this is an NCAA problem or this is just a problem with society in general. But I like to see this change at some point, to stop seeing this as often. And I don't mean as in it stop being reported or stop being showcased, because the amount of times that it's unproportional or improportionate about the amount of times that things like this actually get reported, and the ones that go by the wayside or gets buried underneath and doesn't come out till years later, or even don't come out at all. And that's the real tragedy about this, is that things like this don't get reported nearly as much as they should, or they don't get reported as much as they actually occur. So I don't believe that the NCAA in those certain scenarios are completely 100% clean their hands are not always the cleanest in these scenarios, but it's definitely not just the NCAA problem. As you can see, it's a problem in all major aspects of life and sports. It's just one of them, to where we see athletes not being able to conduct themselves in the greatest light. And it just reminds you that as much money as athletics makes, as much as you see people on TV, no matter how famous people get, they are people, and sometimes they do things that are not good. And it just keeps you a little bit more grounded, and brings everything back to reality, that this isn't like some fantasy land that sports are. Sometimes it can feel like these guys are just players and they have no lives outside of it, but they do have lives outside of just sports, and they affect other people as well. So, with that said, we're going to go ahead and take another break, and we're coming out. We're going to talk about some small things, like LSU finding their passing coordinator, and also some Mississippi State stuff. Some guy was unfortunately found passed away in a lake, and then some Luke Fickle. I'm going to go with Fickle, because that's what it looks like. Luke Fickle stuff are coming up.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMc MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMcpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMcpodcast.com for more info.
So, LSU has found their passing game coordinator for the foreseeable future for a 2-year contract. So, LSU will now hire Cowboys offensive coordinator Scott Linehan as its passing game coordinator, according to Athletics' Bruce Fieldman. And it'll be about $800K per year on 2-year contract. And that's what he'll end up doing for the next few years, I suppose. He spent 9 seasons in the NFL as an offensive coordinator with the Lions and the Cowboys from 2009 to 2018. The 56-year-old was with Dallas from 2015 to 2018 and had Dallas as the top 15 offense in each of his final 3 seasons. He also spent 3 years as a head coach in the NFL, going 11-25 with the Rams from 2006 to 2008. So I guess Orgeron has found his guy that he's been looking for, as he said earlier in the week or last week, that he was looking for more NFL rather than college guys, and he seems to have found an NFL guy that fits for him. And as Joe Brady did leave to go be the offensive coordinator for Matt Rule for the Panthers, this role was definitely something that was on the radar for LSU fans and LSU, alum alike, that folks were really interested to see exactly where this was going. So here we are. I believe that's all the coaching staff filled as far as roles and official positions that Orgeron had to fill up. As you seem to, I know recently he was just shown throwing the pitch for the LSU Tigers baseball game, and I guess he's now going to be pitching a bunch of other things now, since the team is now assembled. It's assembled itself. So we'll see exactly what happens with that. Next is a story from Mississippi State. Former Mississippi State defensive lineman P.J. Jones was identified as a body was found in a lake in Jackson, Mississippi on Wednesday, according to the Clarion Ledger's Rashad Milligan. Jones's body was recovered in Jackson on Monday, and he was identified by Lee County Coroner Carolyn Green on Wednesday. And Jones was 27. The former Bulldogs lineman was clothed in the lake when his body was recovered in the lake, per Milligan. No foul play was reportedly suspected. Jones played 4 games with Mississippi State, in which, that was from 2011 to 2014, he logged 27 career starts and made 45 tackles. He had an instant impact as a freshman, recovering a fumble in the season opening win over Memphis. And Mississippi State posted 4 consecutive winning seasons with Jones in the program. So that is a sad story to hear, and condolences for all the family and all the friends that may have known PJ during his time. Continuing on, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Michigan State head coaching situation that happened this week, and just how we look at guys who actually decide to stick with their program. So Luke Fickell decided to stay with his program that he's been coaching for a few seasons now and remain the Cincinnati head coach. He did do his due diligence and had a meeting with Michigan State officials at his home last Sunday in order to replace Mark D'Antonio, and he was essentially wasn't offered the job officially, but there was an understanding that if he wanted the job, it was all his to take, and he chose not to do it. And they, recently, after I just said a few segments ago, he was kind of called out on it, saying that he is a guy that was waffling around and not really making decisions. And it seemed to me that he did make his decision, and that was to stick with the guys that he recruited, stick with the guys that he's been coaching for a few years. I don't see anything wrong with that. It's funny how the bigger conferences try to put pressure on guys like this to come coach, and it didn't seem like they offered him, I don't know what type of money they offered him, but I would assume that it had to have been close to what Tucker got for what he's doing now. And this is a guy who essentially has a much better proven record as a coach than Tucker as of right now. And it just seems to me that he kind of understands what the situation is more than I guess Tucker does. Or maybe Tucker did understand, there was just too much money to give up. I can't say. I'm not him, and I'm not in his head or speak with him at all. So I don't know. But it seems to me that this whole situation is essentially a forced hand. They have no other choice but to look for a head coach. And there was no head coaching available or anybody looking for a job like this. So Fickell was not prepared to go look for another job. So when they came after him and sought after him, essentially, this is not something that was really on his mind. He was probably 100% committed to Cincinnati from the jump because that's what he went into the season with. That's what all these guys went into the season with. That's why when Mel Tucker originally declined it, it made sense. Nobody expected D'Antonio to announce his retirement last week. No one saw that coming. Maybe small people inside the Michigan State, I guess, circle saw it. But other than that, you can't really expect people to know what's going on. Anyway, Fickell, he went 22-5 in his past 2 seasons at Cincinnati. That's a really good record. He's in the top 25 as far as people think they should be ranked, saying that he might be 12th in the nation. There's a lot of things coming out for Cincinnati and their football program, and he's a big part of that. So I wouldn't see why he would essentially risk that, or not even risk it, but more so leave it. Something that he's essentially grown from his ground up, and he's got new recruits coming in. And this is going to be a real big pivotal point for him to push forward and make the Cincinnati program bigger on the map and bring another, Ohio product to, the forefront of college football fans' minds, and I guess visual presence. Everything is about how you appear to some people. There's multiple teams everywhere. So, for example, Florida has a lot of teams that, even that team UCF, they're not the best team in the world, but everybody knows about them because they go out there, they win, and they have a big name coach behind them that has been that pushes for them to be in the conversation talked about. And, Florida State, Miami, they all are ranging as far as, talents and ability, but, they still recognize and still have historic presence within the college football atmosphere. And that's something that you always want to have in sports. That's why there's so many enriched programs around the nation that you like to look at, cheer for, and have history for. And maybe he's trying to make history his own way in Cincinnati. So that way it's maybe not always about Ohio State. I guess that's where I see it as. Maybe they just don't want it to always be about Ohio State and Ohio State this. And they say, well, we can have something here, can't we? We can make something worthwhile besides Ohio State and LeBron James. Let's do something in Cincinnati that brings people together and let people show what we have to offer to the rest of the college football world. And I applaud him for that. This was I think it's a good move for him. And I think it just showcases again the desperation of some of these head honchos here in college football, trying to pry away any semblance of other guys trying to make a name or other programs trying to build themselves up. And the predatory nature of these guys, just because they have a big sack of money, sometimes it doesn't always work out for them. And I find that I thoroughly appreciate what that coach decided to do. And, I also appreciate or I respect what Tucker did as well, because sometimes you just have to chase the bag. But we're going to take our final break, and then we're going to get into our last segment of the day, which would be about the college fan and different types of college fans out there. And maybe it's time to see just how many different ones are out there, because I think everybody watches college football a bit differently now, and it's just fun to analyze. So that's coming up.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
So before we wrap things up here, I wanted to talk about fans. Fans over the years have been interesting as far as how the idea of what a fan is has evolved over time. Fans used to be fans of teams, really, or programs, or states, local guys. So if you lived in, let's say, New York, probably were a Yankees fan, probably were a Giants fan, and so on and so forth. Or if you lived in, Michigan, probably were a Michigan fan or a Michigan State fan. You picked, and that was the end of it. You're a fan for life, essentially. Through the ups and downs, through the good times and the bad, you wore that, I guess, those letters and that, the flag or the team apparel on your chest, and be proud of it. Wear it as a badge of honor or something that you can always hold on to until the end of your days. And now fans are different in all aspects of sports. So we have more people really being fans of players and fans of other teams, inside states, and, you know, really, even my dad, who I've heard from multiple of his friends over the years say, my dad is a really big Saints fan, so am I. Love the Saints. And all the time they like to tease him, saying, oh, you grew up a Cowboys fan, or you grew up this, that, and the third, because the Saints weren't good back then. And so even back then, even in the late 60s, people were, people were changing the mindset of what it is to be a fan. So first things first, you gotta win. People love winning more than anything in the world because it validates their feelings towards sports teams that they like. So that's when bandwagoning became a thing. I remember, or I'm sure it's always been a thing, but I remember, during the Miami Heat era where LeBron was playing on the Miami Heat, I don't think I've ever heard the term bandwagoning be so used before in my lifetime. It was like a new phrase came about or something like that where, oh, you're just hopping on the bandwagon because he brought all these people here with him to Miami and now they're the best team in the league. And now all of a sudden you're a Miami Heat fan and, you know, you weren't here back when even the Shaq, Dwayne Wade Ghost Finals, or you weren't here for Alonzo Mourning. You weren't here through all the bad years or all the tough years. You weren't here through Dwayne Wade carrying us through the playoffs, this, that, and the third, and all that stuff. And then we get to, of course, the Golden State Warriors and bandwagoning. Then we get to the Patriots and the bandwagoning. And then we get to the Alabama and then the bandwagoning. And then Florida before Alabama is bandwagoning. And then now Clemson has kind of become this. And then LSU. And it seems to be in college football for fans. The hot team, you're always going to bandwagon them at a certain point. Especially when your team has no real shot of going to the title or anything like that. You're going to hop on the team that, you know, you find more enjoyable to watch or to, I guess, you know, tolerate winning, I guess. So that means probably not LSU if you're a fan of SEC schools. You didn't cheer for LSU. And, you know, if you were a fan of, I don't know, Michigan, you definitely aren't cheering for Ohio State. But outside of that, I think fan culture has really been interesting in college football because I feel like there's something so deeply rooted in being, either if you're an alumni of a school or if you've just been a long time fan. I think it's really hard to switch sides. It's hard for fans to say, okay, I don't want to support this anymore. It would take like some really big stuff for people to hop from a college support. Like, even when Penn State had their thing with Sandusky, the fans stayed, or they tried to be as supportive as possible. And the players, because it wasn't something that, I guess the team overall did. It was, you know, a few people in the program, and, you know, the program suffered quite harshly for it. But at the end of the day, they stayed loyal because they love the team and they love Penn State and they love what the team represents, which is their school. So, man, fans are super in the college football atmosphere or college atmosphere. Fans are so loyal. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because it's not professional. Not everybody gets paid, and granted, we're moving towards times where the athletes should be compensated. But I don't know. It's kind of akin to the idea of, I guess, loyalty and being one, one commodity underneath something like that. So the badge of pride and the badge of honor to wear, saying my school did this, my school won this. What has your school done? Or, you know, my school is better than yours because we've gone to so many national championships, national titles. We've won this, that, and the third. It builds a level of arrogance that it's hard to not build, especially like if you go to like Alabama in any of the last 10 years, you graduated from there, or like you at least attended, or, you've been a fan your whole life. What can anybody say to you? Nothing, really. Nobody can tell you anything. You are on top of the world, no matter what. You have full faith in your program, no matter what. And you'll never waver. But in things like the NFL or the NBA, all it takes is a trade or a bad offseason or not really an injury, but, it just takes bad management. And all of a sudden, it's starting to waver. You start to question, like, is it time to jump ship? Has this draft pick is really going to take me over the edge? Like for me, I used to be a really big Phoenix Suns fan growing up because I really, really loved Steve Nash. He was one of my favorite players I've ever watched play basketball. And as the Suns got through the mid 2010s, they started making some decisions in the draft and in free agency, which I just didn't like. Their team was already weird, especially once Nash left. They just had a bunch of guards. They had Gordon Dragic. They had Eric Bledsoe, Isaiah Thomas, Gerald Green. Had a bunch of guards. It was a real guard-heavy team, and they drafted T.J. Warren. But I think where I drew the line was it was the Buddy Hield draft. It definitely wasn't when Anthony Davis was drafted. I knew I was still very much a Suns fan at the point, but I was not into the draft pick that they made. I think it was for Alex Len, and it wasn't Dragan Bender, but I think it was the Alex Len draft where I said enough was enough because I just didn't agree with these picks. And I just said, I'm fed up. So it was time for me to go. And I essentially turned in my fan resignation of the Suns, and I became a Pelicans fan, or at the time it was the New Orleans Hornets, now Pelicans. And since then I've been a Pelicans fan. And you could argue that I've been in similar positions with the Pelicans than I have with the Suns, but I would never really think about doing that for a lot of other sports, like even the Saints. The Saints, it would have to be something really horrendous for me to just jump ship from the Saints, like life altering. I own too much gear. I have too much emotional investment in that team to probably ever jump ship. It would be something catastrophic. And for college football, I don't really have I rooted for LSU growing up for a long time, but once I went to my own college and got super invested into Division II sports, it kind of changed my whole outlook on LSU. Not really as in like I don't like them. I still rooted for them to win national title, but that's not my team. I didn't go to school there, and it's not something that was for me. But go UWG, go Wolves. And with that said, that'll be the end of the GSMc College Football Podcast. It's been going great so far. Thanks for all the support. Don't forget to leave a review on whatever platform you do listen to the podcast on, and don't forget to follow us on all our social media. So that's our Facebook, our Instagram, and our Twitter. So don't forget to check us out on other podcasts on the network. See you guys next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMc Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMc Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.